Hello, and welcome back to the 9th episode of the Tower Sports Advising Podcast. Today's special guest, my friend KB, assistant coach at Princeton University.
What's up, Zach? Thanks for having me, man.
No problem. Glad to have you on.
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
All right. I want to start by diving a little bit into your playing career. Played 4 years at Clark University from 2015 to 2018. Freshman year stats at 333 with 35 hits, 4 doubles, and 19 RBIs. Started all 30 games as a freshman. Sophomore year stats, 466 average, 68 hits, 9 doubles, 5 triples, 20 RBIs. Ranked 4th in the NCAA in batting average, NUMAC first team all-conference, Clark University Male Student Athlete of the Year. Set the school record in batting average with 466 average. Runs scored with 46, stolen bases with 21, on-base percentage at a 549 average, and total bases with 87. Junior year stats at 391, 61 hits, 20 doubles, 7 triples, 4 homers, 31 RBIs. Honorable mention All-American, first player in school history, D3 New England Player of the Year, D3 Baseball first team All-New England, NUMAC first team All-Conference. Set the school record in total bases again with 107, doubles in a season with 20, runs in a season with 50, at-bats in a season with 156, and set the record for games played and started in this season. Finished 4th in the NUMAC in batting average, led the NUMAC in doubles and triples, became the program all-time hits leader. Senior year stats, 389 average, 58 hits, 11 doubles, 5 triples, 17 RBIs. NUMAC first team all-conference, ranked second in the NUMAC with a 392 average after playoffs. After a 4-year career at Clark, played 2 professional seasons with the Bakersfield Train Robbers of the Pecos League and the Utica Unicorns of the USPBL. My first question for you is, after playing at Clark for your college career, what were the big takeaways for you in your days with the Cougars?
Honestly, I think I was just really excited to be able to play. I wanted to play college baseball so bad, and I wasn't able to play my freshman year when I was at UNH. So Coach Falcon gave me a shot at Clark, and just being able to get on the field was it just meant so much to me. I really think back to those days. We just had so much fun as a group. Winning ball games was a whole lot of fun. It's kind of changing the culture to going into a game and just expecting to win. That was a really great feeling to have. Thinking, with the relationships that I made with my teammates, my coaches, those types of things are the best memories that, I still think about, still catch up with those guys all the time. And I'm still really grateful for the relationships that we have together, especially all the time, as all the time you spend together on the bus, in the locker room, going to class together, probably living with your teammates and whatnot. You spend a ton of time with those guys. So unfortunately for me, I was able to be around a bunch of great guys, great coaches, great teammates throughout my time at Clark.
Awesome. Moving on to the second question of what was crucial about your development at Clark that helps you in your professional career?
I think after my freshman year, I really started to use my lower half. I think that was a kind of an eye-opening experience for me. I was like, wait, I could drive the ball, not just make contact with the ball. I got a lot stronger too. I think that was huge. I didn't realize how physical college baseball players are, regardless of the level, Division I, Division II, Division III, junior college, whatever. Guys are strong, and they're stronger now than ever before, it seems like. So, being able to hit the weight room and take that development seriously kind of changed the rest of my career, I think. So, yeah, hitting the ball out front of the plate too was big. Something I think just kind of clicked in my head, recognizing a pitch early and just pulling the trigger a little bit earlier than I was used to doing really started to help me just see the ball better. And I think also just as I grew in my career, having a disciplined approach and, making that approach better and better each year was huge. And ultimately going back to the idea of just take what the pitcher gives you, take what the pitcher gives you. No, not trying to do too much and just being ready for the pitch that I was going to get, not the pitch that I wanted. That mindset really helped me a ton.
I think 2 key points that you made there were, now lifting essentially is like the end all be all. I mean, the more people I talk to on the podcast that are coaches are, the kids that are lifting now is almost one, it's in their routine of what they're doing day in and day out on the field and in the off season. But it's also, when we were playing, it wasn't as like demanded of like, we need to get you in the weight room. I feel like nowadays it's like again, I think it was Coach Morales that I had on that we were talking about routines, but kids are so based off of a routine from travel ball to summer ball, then they get to college, then they play summer ball in college. So I think kids are just built off of the routine now, so it kind of throws another thing in there for them.
And I think I always remember back in high school, like it was, well, baseball players don't really need to be that strong. They don't really need to lift. You don't really need to work out. And it was like, it was extremely eye-opening experience when I got to Clark, and I realized I looked around the league, and Babson and Wheaton and Coast Guard and all these Springfield, all these teams are really physical, really strong kids. So yeah, it is really part of the routine now. And I think baseball development has changed so much, in high school and travel ball. It's part of it now. It's part of it. Cause I think coaches, youth coaches, high school coaches are realizing that that's what college coaches are really looking for. And physicality is a really big part of the game. So I might as well get a leg up on the competition if you can get there a little bit earlier than everyone else.
Second part that I had was when you talk about approach, your approach is a lot different than mine. We know that. But like for you, it's what the big difference of a college approach, right, is because high average guy, right? But then you look towards your junior year and senior year, and you're starting to hit more homers, more triples, more doubles. It was junior year, set the single season record. But how much did that part of your approach change with, all right, let's add the weight room into that once you got into pro ball?
I think a lot of that just comes naturally. I think when you get stronger, you just get more confident at the plate, knowing that your bat is moving faster, your lower half is working a little bit better. You don't have to be perfect with your timing. And I never felt like, even my junior senior year, I started to drive the ball a little bit more. I never felt like I was really trying to. I was just literally in certain counts, maybe picking and choosing the spots where I'm like, all right, I'm getting a fastball here, I'm getting a breaking ball here. I'm really gonna not as much sell out, but just sit on it a little bit more. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But if I'm right, I'm catching that ball out in front of the plate a little bit more than I was used to doing. So, yeah, just trying to find the spots where you let it loose a little bit more. But again, I never felt like I was really trying to hit a home run, or I was trying to hit a double. I was just trying to get the barrel on the ball as often as I could. And then with two strikes, reverting back to just being tough, trying to do everything I can to make the pitcher's life a little a little harder for the next couple of pitches.
I can confirm you were a tough out playing against you. Can confirm that. Let's move a little bit into your coaching career. So, started coaching career in 2018, served as graduate and assistant coach at Clark. Then moved on to Amherst in the fall of 2019, served as assistant coach from 2019 to 21, promoted to recruiting coordinator in 21. Worked with infielders, hitters, and base runners, led recruiting efforts and evaluating prospective student athletes throughout the recruiting process. In the 2023 season, Amherst was first in the NESCAC in hits, batting average, runs, on base percentage, doubles, extra base hits, walks, RBIs, and was last in strikeouts. Over your time at Amherst, developed 9 all NESCAC selections. In 2021, coached NESCAC Player of the Year and 5 D3 All New England honorees. Also in 21, the Mammoths won the 2021 NESCAC tournament, leading the coaching staff to be named Conference Staff of the Year. Constructed 3 perfect game D3 top 10 ranked recruiting classes, including 2 that were ranked number 1. Began your first season at Princeton the fall of 23 as an assistant coach and currently still there. Can you explain the differences of coaching at Amherst and Princeton?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, the biggest difference is just the amount of time that we get to spend with our guys on the field. Amherst and the NESCAC in general is a little bit more limited with the amount of time that coaches are able to be there to practice, practice days, practice hours, stuff like that, in the fall, and even when they get started in the spring. And so here at Princeton, we practice a lot. We are with our guys pretty much year round, which is awesome. So definitely a bigger time commitment. I think another thing too is that there's just more of an expectation here of guys who are who have those dreams of playing at the next level. Guys want to come in here and get drafted because they've seen guys, a handful of Princeton guys in the last decade get drafted, not only get drafted and get a shot in pro ball, but make it all the way up to the big leagues. Guys see that, recruits see that, coming in as a high school kid. You're like, I want to do that. So I think that's the challenging part of it, because guys are really dedicated to getting better. I think at Amherst, a place like that, they're certainly dedicated to getting better too, but a lot of that has to come on their own with just the rules that are in place there. So here we get a lot more time to work with our guys on the field.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but NESCAC does not have a fall, correct?
Yeah, I think they've changed the rules where they have a limited fall now. I think they get like 10 days. When I was at Amherst, we had one season where we were allowed to have a fall season, but that was mostly just coming out of the pandemic and trying to get, reacclimated to the sport. So they gave us some time in the fall there. But besides that, it was pretty much captain's practices in the fall. Now they have a little bit of time in the fall, but certainly not as much as we do. Maybe we get started right when we get back to campus, the start of this fall semester, and we go right up until, uh, we're allowed to in like December. So
Right, pretty much your normal D1 essentially fall of I pretty much you guys might be different, right? But I think back when I played, it was you had to be done the week before finals. And
same,
then,
same thing, same thing.
yeah. And then a lot of the other thing that people don't realize is the NESCAC is different than every other D3. So their rules in the fall are essentially different, which is making them already more limited than their normal D3.
Right. And it does make sense with being a high academic conference. They want to give student athletes a chance to explore more of their interest outside of baseball and outside of their sport and stuff. The thing that we loved at Amherst, that we knew guys were getting their work in, whether we were there or not, they were on the field, they were playing because they loved baseball and they wanted to get better. So that was always a good thing.
All right, next question. Is there a coach or coaches that you model your coaching career after?
Yeah, I think I try to take a little bit from everybody that I work for and that I work with. I think I've been really blessed to work around some of the really great coaches in the game. Billy Cather at Clark gave me a start as a graduate assistant. I learned a lot as my first coaching job there, especially being able to bridge kind of the program that was under JP and the program that's now under Billy. Being one of the guys that was there for both of them was a pretty cool experience for me. And then playing for JP and being able to go coach with him for 4 years. He's a guy who I look up to a ton. Still a great friend, great mentor. We keep in touch all the time, and there's a lot of things that he's taught me over the years, both as a coach player relationship and then coach to coach, where he's been able to share quite a bit of wisdom, and what he's learned throughout his journey, which is pretty cool. And then obviously working here for Scott Bradley, he's been doing this a long time and been at Princeton for over 25 years now. Played in the big leagues. He has some experience and some wisdom as well that is top notch. When you're around the game this long and have played at such a high level, coached at such a high level, there's things I'm trying to pick up from him too. A year and a half being here now, I've learned a lot just by trying to pick his brain about how he handles certain situations, what he's seen along the way. So I think in terms of following a path, it's tough to do that in this industry just because the next step is so, you never know where your next job is. You never know when it's going to come. You never know what it's going to look like. So thankfully, I'm really happy here that I've been put in a place where I could learn a ton, get some really great experience, help my guys out as much as I can, and I got a great group to do that with. So, kind of taking to answer your question, a long-winded answer, but just trying to take a little bit from everybody that I coach with, and also some guys that I coach against too. I see how they manage certain things or how they interact with players or treat certain moments and stuff like that I can kind of put in the back of my brain and hopefully add to my game someday.
I think a key part there, and I'm sure you guys say it to your players, is adapting, right? Like as coaches, you still have to adapt to essentially what today's game is. That's not in every, let's say, statistic of the game or the way you prepare for a game, but most coaches that are good at coaching the sport are adapting just like their players. And I think a lot of people get lost in coaches that preach what they want their kids to do is essentially what they want themselves to do. So if they're not getting better and adapting with learning things from, let's say you played Harvard last week, right? And you like something they did, you're going to try to implement that into what you're teaching your kids. And I think a lot of coaches nowadays get essentially lost in everything else. It's like if you preach one thing to your players, you should be doing it yourself.
100%,
And
100%.
I think that's at every level. That's not just at college, that's at high school, that's at travel ball, that's at little league, right?
Yep, absolutely. And we're always learning too, and that's the thing is that I learned a while ago how to be comfortable not being the smartest guy in the room, and trust me, there's not been a ton of instances where I'm the smartest guy in the room, but that's something that I love to just pick up and absorb and learn, and just like you said, I'm hoping that our guys can do the same thing in terms of the mindset of, like, I don't know everything, I don't know, there's a lot that I don't know that I can learn from this game as you just watch and observe and recognize what's going on. So we're always learning, we're always adapting. Absolutely.
I think a big thing that I realized when I had my 3 years of coaching college baseball was the fact of what you just said, right? Of you're not the smartest guy in the room. You might be at some points, but you're not. And I think it's more eye opening as, again, as us as players, right? Moving into that role of coaching. It's like, all right, we knew what we were talking about then, and we might know now, but there's always going to be somebody that knows something more than you. And I think it's the analogy I'll kind of use for it is like being the freshman again, listening to what people are trying to tell you. Like you laugh and I laugh about it, but I'm like, it's the only way people will listen, right? So there's always going to be people above you, right? And if you're going to listen and absorb the energy and the information that they're giving you, you're going to probably be better in the long run.
Absolutely. I think that mindset is everything, you know. And I know as a young coach, I have so much to learn, and I'm incredibly grateful for my experience so far. But I know that I mean, baseball's been around for how many years, and nobody really has it figured out. So, pretending that you have it all figured out is just crazy.
All right, moving on to Northeast baseball. I always like to throw in a question in here for coaches that grew up in the Northeast. What do you think was the hardest part of your personal recruitment growing up in the Northeast?
That's a good question because things have changed so much. Like it's so the landscape in general is so different now than it was when I was in high school. And I went to a really small school. Didn't get a whole lot of exposure there. Didn't really know much about the recruiting process at all. I didn't have a recruiting. I didn't have Tower Sports Advising helping me out. I didn't have any of the people out there that are doing this now. It's become actually an industry where we're trying to help high school players get to the next level, which is great. But I didn't really even know what I wanted, to be honest with you. I didn't know what level I was good enough to play at. I went to two showcases. I couldn't really afford to play like on an expensive travel ball team or go to a whole lot of other showcases. I thought that playing American Legion baseball was such an incredible experience for me. I had so much fun, and it was like the most important thing that I could do as a 15 to 18-year-old was play for Waterbury Post 1, across my chest. That was everything for me. But I'm realizing nowadays, like, you got national teams everywhere. You got, teams that are playing at all these high exposure tournaments and showcases all over the country. It's just so different. But I do think the being able to get yourself in front of coaches was key, and that's not something I was able to do a very good job at, and until it was a little bit too late. So like I said, I thank Jason Falcon for giving me my start at Clark, because I reached out to a ton of schools, didn't really know what to say, but just really knew that I wanted to play. And he was the guy who gave me a shot and really wanted me to go to Clark. So thankful that I got the chance there, because everything ends up working out and everything happens for a reason. But I do think that the recruiting game has changed drastically since I was in high school.
I think the key point there is Legion back in our day was like a prominent baseball league, right? Like,
It
and
was.
they're still in Mass, like it's still played. Obviously, I grew up in Mass. Like for me growing up, I played travel ball, but travel ball wasn't like it is today, right? Like, yeah, there was like national teams were kind of beginning to be a thing. Not really though, but like people would go play your 15, 16-year-old year in Georgia. You'd go play that perfect game tournament at East Cup. Like you could just go then. Yes, it was good baseball, sure. And then I think a lot of it gets lost in like I was 17, I committed to Pierce, and then I committed to UMass Lowell, decommitted all that stuff. But in that, after travel ball was done, I went and played Legion. Like Legion was super competitive. There's a bunch of kids that were committed to college that would just go play college. Coach Jimmy Smith that I did on the last podcast was like, I never played travel baseball. I just played Legion. And he played at Wheaton. He was a 4-year starter at Wheaton. But it's back in our day, I think it was if you were good enough, they would come find you. And I think the the world we live in today is so oversaturated again with players, because there are a lot of players everywhere you go, right? And I think nowadays I don't see as much as the college coaches coming to watch kids play in high school. Yes, some still do, but I think some also depend on that summer circuit of, we're going to see what you do here, but we're going to follow you through high school as well, and then we'll come see you in the summer.
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree. And I think I always that phrase, if you're good enough, they'll find you. That was always ringing in my head, and I think I actually leaned on that a little bit too much, where I wasn't as proactive as I should have been. I didn't do as much research as I should have on the schools and the type of schools that I should be going to. But again, I didn't really know if I was good enough to play Division 1 baseball. I didn't Division 2, Division 3. I had no idea. I had some teammates that I would play with that are getting recruited by Division 1 schools, or this guy committed to a Division 3 school. Wait a minute, he's really good. Why is he going Division 3? I didn't realize that there were really good players at the Division 3 level, or why is this kid going to junior college? I was like, oh wait, there's top 5 round draft picks coming out of junior college every year. That's why. So it really just goes to show that, you got to do your homework. You gotta be proactive, and there's really good baseball at all different levels. You just have to kind of find the right fit for you.
The right fit. And I still think to today that is the most important of, you're finding a fit that works for you. Like, the more student athletes I talk to, of they're worried about the right fit, whereas the parent is worried about what college they're going to. And I think that is, again, in your situation, you're at Princeton, so the top of the top, right? Ivy League school. But for a lot of parents, they look at it as, all right, well, my kid has a chance to get a very good opportunity here, or he has a very good opportunity here and he gets to play a sport. And a lot of times they'll favor towards just not playing the sport. And again, I'm nobody's parent, but I guarantee you the life lessons you're going to learn by going to college and playing a sport, you're going to learn a lot more than being just a normal student.
That's right. That's right. I agree. And I think there's just so much to learn on a college sports team, and a lot of, even post graduation life when you're applying for jobs, a lot of, recruiters are attracted to college athletes, for that drive and that time management skill that you absolutely have to have if you're going to be, if you're going to be able to handle playing a sport in college. But I heard once, and it always stuck with me. I heard a coach say, like, go to a school that you would be happy with if you couldn't tell anybody about it. If you would just be happy without, you're not able to post your commitment on Instagram, you're not able to tell everybody, oh, I'm committed to go wherever. If you just had to go there and you couldn't tell anybody and you're still happy at that place, or you could imagine yourself being happy there, like that's the place that you ultimately want to be. It's not about status. It's not about Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. It's literally about that fit, and ultimately what's most important in your college experience. You want to be happy somewhere. You want to be able to go somewhere where you're enjoying your time and you're able to. For me, happiness was being on the baseball field. I wanted an opportunity to play. As simple as that. I thought the rest will take care of itself. If I have an opportunity to play at a pretty good academic school where, I could just go there, be myself, and and the rest will kind of fall into place. So it all worked out. It all worked out, but everyone's path is a little bit different. Just like getting into coaching, and you never know what the next step is everyone's recruiting process is a little bit different too. It's tough to kind of carve out an exact playbook for every student athlete.
Moving on into the next question of, do you feel like the talent in the Northeast is better now or than when we played growing up?
That's that's a really good question. I don't know. I think probably it's just so different. It's just so different. There's more focus on like skill development at a younger age now. Travel, high school, all those programs are even down to the youth. Like they're kind of like a different way than we did probably when we were kids. They're more focused on year-round training and being faster, being stronger. Like we said before, the strength and conditioning part, the lifting, like being able to be a little bit more physical, a little bit younger. Helps your recruiting process a ton. It's different. I think back though when I was in high school and going to some of these tournaments, state tournaments for Legion and whatnot. There's some really good players. So I'm not sure, but I just think it's really different. Guys are just better, or a little bit more developed skill wise. I'm not sure if the game of baseball is taught the same way, or the strategy and the IQ and the feel of it. But I think kids are definitely probably a little bit more talented than they were back when we were in high school.
Right. I have two ways of looking at it. And obviously, I coach travel baseball, so I kind of see it firsthand every day. I think when we were growing up, I think when I was 9 years old, which would have been, I was born in 94. So what's that? 2003, nine. Yeah. So that was the start of essentially AAU baseball, right? And at nine, when I was nine, they only had like, I think it was like 12 and then 13 on the big field and then like 15 and 18. Like there wasn't every single division of AAU baseball like it is now. And again, I think nowadays, I think the ceiling is so high for a lot of kids that it's like, all right, you grew up from 9 to 18, right? And you're the one, you get to lift every day. You get to go to the facility and hit. You get to do plyo balls. You get to pitching lesson. You get a hitting lesson. You get a strength training twice a week, whatever it may be. I think the ceiling is so high that some of those kids are so much further ahead. And I feel like when we played, the kids that weren't as developed essentially as the kids that ended up playing college baseball, I think the gap is more there, if that makes sense. I think the kids nowadays that are doing all these things, it's almost like forced because their next door neighbor's doing it, their best friend's doing it. And I think a lot of parents get lost in the fact of you're doing all this, but the ceiling is that much bigger nowadays. It's not all right, everyone's here, we're here. And I think that's the separator for me is the kids that weren't that good are in today's world are not good at all and they don't have a chance. I think and that's the nicest way I'm going to put that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like a lower floor and a higher ceiling. It's I think too when we were growing up and going through that stage of our career, like if you were one of those players that was good enough, you were probably working pretty hard. And now, like you said, there's a lot of guys just kind of doing the same thing. But ultimately, I think one of the really important parts of the recruiting process for me is trying to find how much the passion of the game means to these guys. You know, how much do you truly love the game of baseball? You know, um, because I don't see the love of the game as much in like that type of going with the hitting lessons and the strength training twice a week and whatever. That's the practicing part. And yeah, that might be a little bit hard. They might push you absolutely for sure. The love of the game though is when you're 0 for 4 and like how you're carrying yourself there. Being able to play a lot of games, you can't really do it year round in the Northeast, obviously, because we have days like this all the time. But when you do have that game experience and learning from that and also having fun with that, that's what made baseball for me. It wasn't necessarily the training part of it. That, of course, you got to do that, but it's going out and competing and being able to fail and learn from it. All those things are pretty much what make up the game to me. So I think there's a little bit less of that and a little bit more of the facility stuff, which is fine. It's just different than when we were growing up.
All right, let's move on into recruiting. What are you looking for in a recruit when you go to see them play? You can break it up by pitchers and hitters. Is there something that stands out for you about both?
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out for both is competitiveness and toughness. It's not always easy to see. I think maybe a little bit more for pitchers when they're not having a great outing or they give up a hit. Pretty much how they react, how they handle themselves on the mound, how they manage the game. Um, again, it's relatively easy when things are going great to just continue to roll and be confident out there. But it really is a game of failure. So being able to see how guys handle adversity is really important to me. So, on the hitting side of things in particular, athleticism is key, being able to have some physicality, whether it's, power or speed. And for me, power doesn't necessarily mean home runs, it just means driving the ball, being able to hit doubles. That's really important, controlling the barrel, making hard contact consistently. But, for the position player side of things, you're usually looking for one or two tools that kind of stand out, but ultimately you got to be able to hit. If you can't hit, you can't really play at the college level, or even if you can, you're probably not going to get as much of an opportunity. That's just the reality. So you got to be able to swing it at least just a little bit, but then also just know yourself, have a feel for the game. I think when we're looking at the big picture with the recruiting class, it kind of depends on how that puzzle kind of comes together, and then the bigger picture and the entire roster, how that's coming together and what that looks like over the next couple of years. So we obviously want some game changing tools, but the reality is we just need something that we talk about at Princeton is just raising the floor, like making sure we talked about high ceiling and a low floor. Everyone can see the really good and everyone can see the really bad. But there's a whole lot of gray area in the middle with some really good ball players mixed in there. You got to kind of sort through it and weed it out and find those guys. Because there's a whole lot of average, but if you could take yourself from an average player to an above average player, those are the guys that we want, on the team. And we're always looking to make our team better. I know that sounds really, really simple, but we're never trying to bring in guys that are going to keep us where we're at. We want to find better players always. So the guys on our roster now know that we're trying to recruit players that are better than them. We might fall short. That's part of it, but it's it's part of trying to constantly grow the program, and hopefully the guys on the roster now develop. We bring in better players, they push them, and it's just a continuous cycle of getting better and staying competitive. And I think the other thing for pitchers, it's again, the game has changed so much. Back when we were in high school, maybe a guy throwing 85 was getting Division I interest like automatically. If they were throwing 90, it was like, oh, this kid's definitely going D1.
That's
Now it's
it's
just
like
changed so much.
back in our day, if you weren't throwing 90 at D1 wasn't coming to watch you in a high school game.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it's like now, again, depending on where it is and who it is, essentially in our area, guys are coming to watch guys that are 85 plus, right? Because you're trying to find, essentially, like you're saying, those guys that were already at 85. How do we get them to 90? How do we get them to 95? Whatever it may be. And I think a cool part of kind of that is I think of a lot of friends that I have in today's game of that I played against. I mean, you for an example, right? I played against you growing up. And it's a lot of the guys that I know that are coaching at schools where they're D1, D2, D3, JUCO, NAIA, whatever it may be, they're looking for those kids. And I feel like back in our day, people weren't looking for those kids. And I think that's where the investment in those kids end up having those high ceilings, essentially, like we said. But those kids want a chance. Where it's like for us, like all we wanted growing up was chance and somebody to give us that opportunity. And it's like, I think a lot of kids get lost in the process of recruiting now of not getting that chance. Not saying they don't deserve it. They just never get that chance.
Right. Right. And again, the recruiting process is just, it's hard. It's hard. It was hard when we were going through it. It's hard now because it's again, it's changed a lot, and it's kind of tough to get a read on what you should be doing at each, stage in the recruiting process. But ultimately what it comes down to for me is that we're looking, the talent has to be there. It has to be there, but players need to be, need to be athletic. They need to be tough. They need to manage a game. Pitchers need to throw 2 pitches for strikes, and hitters need to put the ball in play consistently. If you can do that, you at least give yourself a chance.
My quote for parents is you won't understand the recruiting process at the current moment. And even if you commit to a school, you won't understand it. Because there's so many schools that do it differently. Everyone does it differently, right? So there's no norm for the recruiting process anymore, especially not now. And you could be a super late sign in your senior year, whether it's D1, D2, D3, it doesn't matter anymore. Essentially, obviously the rules are pretty much the same of when you can start your recruiting process. But I've seen guys go to D1s as late as March or beginning of their high school season of their senior year.
Yeah, it's again, everyone's path is a little bit different, so you gotta be patient, but you also gotta. The one thing that stays consistent should be like the work behind it, the work and the staying ready and the preparing yourself to go out and play good baseball, because that's ultimately what all coaches want.
I tell hitters at showcases, you go 3 for 3 and a coach sees you, you're going to get at least a conversation, right? And it's showing that you can show up to the field. So if you want to play let's just say you want to go to Princeton, have a good game in front of them. But I think a lot of people also get lost of you had a good game. Now you have to have a conversation with them. Are you able to have that conversation with a college coach? And I think that's a whole nother conversation that we could sit here for a whole hour and talk about it.
No doubt.
Moving on into the next question. Are you more likely to recruit kids from team camps or showcases or go and watch them play in like a perfect game or a prospect select event?
I think it depends. I think the answer is both of those things are really important to us. I think in a showcase, your physical tools probably stand out a little bit more. We can go to a game and I really want to see how this kid plays shortstop, and he gets 0 balls hit to him at shortstop. It's just that's baseball, right? At a showcase, at least you're gonna get some action. But ultimately, I think in an ideal world, you go and you first off, you do your homework beforehand. regardless if it's a tournament or a showcase or whatever, especially with us with the academic standards and the tight window we have to stay in. We can't just fly blind at a showcase or a tournament. We got to kind of go in there with a plan and knowing who exactly we can look at and who we can talk to from an academic standpoint. But yeah, I think it's really important for us to watch them play in game like scenarios. And ideally we'd love to see more high school games during the spring. Our seasons are running parallel with each other, so it's really hard to get out and watch, high school games at this point. But, being able to watch them actually play a baseball game and not just a bunch of showcases is really important to see how they carry themselves on the field and how they interact with their teammates and do they understand the feel for the game and, kind of as a situation arises and a switch situation changes, do you change your approach? Do you change your identity based on the score and stuff like that? So, um, it kind of comes back to that toughness part and being able to manage a game. You see that a little bit more during games, so I think it's important to try to get out and at least cross check at watching some actual games.
I think a lot of coaches are very different, and some guys will recruit from all team camps and showcases. And again, like you said, there's a lot of people that are 50-50. But I think, and again, I've said it a bunch, is a lot of value that coaches will see is when you're in, let's say, we'll talk about it later in the pod, but at their showcase, right? Whether it's a team camp or a showcase on campus, of more of that showcase on campus is the way I look at it, of you take that athlete that you're essentially recruiting and you put them on that solo island of maybe they're not comfortable with anyone there. And I feel like a lot of time, especially in today's world, you see a lot more about the player when they're in a solo setting compared to when you see them in that team setting, because anyone can be good in a team setting. But when you get to college, you might not have any friends that are in that recruiting class. Yeah, you'll make them eventually through your years, but I think there's a lot of value in seeing how you perform as that solo athlete.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It is an uncomfortable experience sometimes, especially when you're not used to it. You first camp, first showcase, you show up by yourself, and you got to go out there and do it. You don't have any friends there. I always, whenever we're running a camp or a showcase, I always try to ease the nerves a little bit and remind the guys to have fun and make a friend today. Might be able to help them relax a little bit and just play. But again, it's not like the buddies that you've been playing with all year or for multiple years now. You're going out there and it's up to you to perform. So that sounds very pressure packed, and it is. You got to kind of slow it down and just remember why you're there and be yourself and have fun at all these things.
Moving on to the next question. Do you guys use the transfer portal for recruiting, or can you? And do you believe the transfer portal is helping the sport of baseball?
We do not use the transfer portal. Again, Coach Bradley has been at Princeton for over 25 years. He's had zero transfers. So not
That's
something that
crazy.
it is, especially
It's
nowadays because
crazy.
it's everyone's using the transfer portal, but we are not. So yeah, I do think there are some good things about it. For college baseball in general, a little bit more control to the student athlete in terms of their experience and being able to find a place where they can play and whatnot. I do think it's gotten a little crazy. It seems like some players are bouncing around nonstop. So I think maybe more regulations are to come or something. But I do actually selfishly, I'm happy with the state of the transfer portal because honestly, it helps us at Princeton. Us not using it helps us a ton because we're getting better recruits than ever before because we're getting guys that don't want to deal with all that. After their freshman year, after their sophomore year, we don't have grad transfers in the Ivy either. So it's 4 years here, and regardless of how many years you played on the field, that you can't stay for a fifth year and do grad school here. I guess if you take a year off or something, we've had some COVID guys and whatnot where you take a year off from school, but not too many players or people in general want to delay an Ivy League degree. So selfishly, it's helped us out a little bit where we're kind of able to avoid a lot of the craziness that's going on in the portal right now.
Cool take on it for sure, though, because I'm sure there's other schools out there that don't. And it's just crazy to hear people talk about it. And it's like, again, Coach Bradley sticking to his roots of, what'd you say? He's been there for 25 years?
Yeah, I think like 27 years now actually.
Or
But yeah, and he says that it's just really hard to do. I think, especially with the timeline, it doesn't really match up. Like a transfer would have to take pretty much a year off, and by the time that our transfer application deadline, comes up, it doesn't match up with where we are recruiting wise. So it's really tough to do. You'd have to really plan it out, take a year off or at least a semester off, and it's kind of a hassle. And I think athletes in general doesn't really work out a ton at Princeton. I know we had a track athlete a couple of years ago, but the amount of transfers that get into Princeton is you could pretty much count on two hands each year. It's not a very high number at all. So it's really not worth our efforts when it comes to recruiting transfers.
All right, moving on to the next question of, can you explain how important it is for recruits to attend like a head first or show ball showcase if they're looking to play in the NESCAC or the Ivy League?
Yeah, I mean, all the coaches are there at the same time, so it makes a lot of sense. I think when you identify a type of school that you want to go to, and with the high academic type of student athletes, usually it's the Ivy League and the NESCAC and the Patriot League and, places like that. It just makes sense to try to get on the field in front of all of them. So I think a lot of the head first showcase or head first show ball, we've been going to show ball for years now. So, that type of stuff, it makes sense. I do think it's really important to, like I said, we're looking for a standout skill or two. Like you got to bring that with you on a day like that, because there's a lot of players there, there's a lot of coaches there. So obviously you want to put your best foot forward. So if you're a guy who could really run, you're going to want to do everything in your power to run, a 6'5" at that showcase. If you could drive the ball, you're going to want to try to lose some baseballs in BP by hitting them over the wall. Whatever your game is, just make sure you're showing that off on a day like that, because it is, like I said, there's usually a lot of players there, a lot of coaches there, a lot going on. So you want to find a way to stand out. But also at a camp like that, I also think it's really important that you do your homework on us. You on the schools that you're looking at. There's usually a Q&A, meet and greet type session where student athletes come up and ask us questions. You want to be able to ask good questions, unique questions, because we get a lot of generic questions. You want to be able to stand out a little bit. So do your homework first off, make sure you know who you're talking to, know a little bit about the school that you're approaching, and then try to find a way to, ask good questions, but maybe not the same questions that we get asked 90% of the time. It's always, what are you looking for in a recruit? And, I know that's kind of something everybody wants to know, but if you could find a little bit more of a unique way to ask that, you probably find a better answer. And you also stand out.
I think the next question that I'm going to lead with is kind of a cool question that I personally, if I was a recruit and I asked you, I feel like this is a cool question to ask. Is there something that a recruit will do that will immediately cross them off your list?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the first thing that comes in my head is, if there's just no talent there, there's not much we can do. It's just being completely honest. You got to have a certain level of talent and athleticism. But I think right there with that is how you carry yourself as a baseball player and as a person. It's always harder to judge character based off of a showcase or a 1 day camp or whatever, because obviously the student athlete is trying to put their best foot forward, right? They're trying to hustle on and off the field. They're trying to do all the things that they think coaches want to see. But coaches are usually always watching. So being able to pick up on some of these things are really, really important for us. So really just how you carry yourself, how you interact with your coaches, how you interact with your teammates, how you interact with your parents after the game. If your mom or dad is carrying your bag for you, it's not a great look. I'm gonna be honest with you. Uh, your body language throughout, whether things are going great, things are going not so great, that's really important. Uh, so all those little things, I think that's probably the easiest way to get crossed off a list. If you hit a pop up and you don't run it out, it's going to be a tough time. I'm going to have a tough time recruiting you. I'm going to have a tough time going back to Coach Bradley and saying, this kid is really good and he's going to be a hard worker for us. Maybe you will be, but you're not showing me that with your actions right there. If you're 0 for 2 and you're going out into the field and you're walking out there and you're moping and your shoulders are sagged and you're feeling sorry for yourself, guess what? It's a game of failure. You're going to fail a whole lot more in college than you did in high school. So that's not a guy that we probably want to take a chance on, especially when you're only able to bring in 7 recruits a year. So body language and how you carry yourself is everything. in the recruiting process.
I think a lot of recruits get lost in the fact of if you do it there, you're going to do it when you get to college. When you get your 1 at bat or 2 at bats, your 10 at bats freshman year, and you don't run out a hard 90 or whatever it may be on a pop fly or a weak ground ball or shortstop, like that sticks in the coach's in the mind of like, all right, well, he didn't do it here and he's not going to do it there. So why would I even waste my time and give him a second opportunity of, all right, let me go watch him again. And I think kids get lost in that. And I think the other part too that you made there is you're the second person that said mom and dad shouldn't be carrying your baseball bag. Coach Goff said it on the last podcast that I did. And he goes, if I see a recruit walk off the field and hand their bag to their parents, I'm crossing them off my list. When you're at these tournaments and you're in your 17-year-old, essentially some kids are 16, but 17-year-old year, which is your junior year, right? You should be at the point where this should be on your own. Your mom and dad shouldn't be bringing your bag to the game. Yes, there are circumstances, right? Mom and dad came from work, your bag was in their car or whatever. You forgot your glove. Like that stuff happens. It'll happen in college. I played with more guys that have forgot jerseys on the road, and it is what it is. But recruits, I think the big message is moving forward is do everything on your own. I tell kids all the time, show up to the field by yourself. Like your parents can show up on their own, but it's like bring your own Gatorades, bring your own lunch, like avoid having your parents involved on the field as much as you can. Because again, once you get to freshman year, they're not involved anymore. It's you and the coaching staff at whatever school you end up playing at.
That's right. I couldn't agree more. And teaching that independence is everything. You know, you got to take ownership of your recruiting process, and just like you got to take ownership of your career once you get there. So absolutely agree with that.
All right, moving on to the last question about recruiting is what is your best advice to a high school athlete trying to play college baseball at the current moment?
But I think honestly, the most important part is getting better, you know, getting better and developing. Being able to navigate the recruiting process is really tricky, but as that is going on, as you are figuring out how exactly to do that, you got to be getting better. You got to be in the weight room. You got to be playing baseball. You got to be able to work on what your, you know, some of your weaknesses are, and try to just become a better overall baseball player. Kids get caught up in what should I be doing? How often should I be reaching out? What showcase should I go to? And if you're worried about all that and not, you know, practicing and not getting better at the game, it doesn't really matter what you're doing on the other side. But then obviously, like, you know, being able to communicate and figure out exactly what you want is really important too. So as you're grinding, as you're working hard, being proactive, but you know, but also patient, knowing that, you know, not everyone's process looks the same. Don't worry about what's happening with your friends and where their process is, you know, but just trying to focus on getting in front of the coaches at the right time. I think timing is really, really important. If there's a camp in December and you're in middle of the basketball season and you're not ready to go, you know, showcase what you have, I'd say probably sit that one out and wait until your game is a little bit, you know, more tuned up, and you have a product that you want to show off a little bit more. So I think timing is key. I think being proactive is key. And I think obviously reaching out and communicating with coaches without overdoing it is really, really important in trying to establish the relationship with the coaches.
I think a lot of it too is, and then pretty much everybody that I've had on the pod, we've talked about Twitter, but it's like coaches will follow you on Twitter, right? You reach out or essentially just follow them and they will follow you back. But it's like that's them kind of essentially bridging the gap of like kids are on the path of we're posting video of practice, games, live at bats, whatever it may be, right? And it's also, I think, what I've seen a lot of recruits that end up going to college is they post their schedule, but it's not like I'm forcing this to the coach, right? It's I'm posting it. Whatever coach is at this event and sees it, they show up. And again, yes, if you're really interested in, let's say, Princeton, you might send an email before that of, hey, coach, I posted everything. Here's also documentation. And if you need updates of essentially if there's rain delays or whatever it may be, I can provide those as well. And I think some coaches will say it and some coaches won't, of like, I want the guy that's just feeding me their schedule and wants me to be there. And then there's other coaches that will say, I want more of that leniency of like, all right, every 2 weeks you reach out with your schedule, whatever it may be while we're on.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a balance, and it's probably different for everybody. But you're right about the Twitter. It's free. It's easy to be able to send that information to multiple coaches at the same time, like indirectly without like overdoing it. So that's kind of my thing, is that there is such thing as like, I don't need a weekly text. I don't need a weekly email from every recruit. I have so many emails in my inbox right now that I read, but I don't necessarily get back to everyone, just because I literally wouldn't have the time in the day to respond to all the players that are interested in coming to Princeton. Doesn't mean you shouldn't reach out. It's just being strategic about it, and being able to, again, be patient in certain parts of the process is also really.
Kind of a question I have there for you is like, what is something that somebody might have sent you that caught your eye? Like, just
Usually
let's just say in an email, like that doesn't even have to be out to a video or anything.
I might be a little old school in terms of stuff like this. I know like high school stats don't matter, but when you have an accolade in high school that stands out, it'll catch some eyes. If you're the player of the year in a conference or all state, like that's still really important to me. So stuff like that is always good. I think, again, it's tough to say. We don't look too far into the metrics. Again, everyone seems to be a little bit more focused on velocity nowadays than ever before. So we know that there are guys out there that can throw upper 80s, low 90s in high school. The same thing with the exit velo and stuff. It's the exit velo. Obviously, it's great to see that you can hit the ball hard. Can you consistently put the barrel on the ball? That's ultimately the question. So yeah, I mean, the metrics show a little bit. I think accolades are a little bit more important. Again, every competition level is a little bit different across the country, and depending on where you're at. But if you hit everywhere you go, then you're probably a pretty good hitter. If you could put up numbers in the high school and then in the summer. Again, I don't really need to know your batting average or your exact stats, but if you could see like this guy can handle the pitching at multiple levels, and then he goes down to Georgia to East Cobb or the PBR events or whatever. And so look, another, an all tournament team there. I think those type of things ultimately, when they stack up, they do stand out to us.
All right. Both hitting guys, so I want to move a little bit on to talking about hitting. Amherst was first in the NESCAC in hits, batting average, runs, on base percentage, doubles, extra base hits, walks, RBIs, and you guys were last in strikeouts in your last year there. What is something that you preach to your hitters there to achieve that success?
It sounds really, really simple, but there is a lot of buy-in to being yourself, just being who you are as a hitter and knowing your strengths and just playing into those. Also, I said it before, but I think taking what the pitcher gives you, it was really, really important. Again, got a lot of buy-in where, you're not selling out for the pitch that you want. You're getting ready for the pitch that you're going to get, and you're just seeing the ball. And then honestly, hunting, being able to hunt your pitch early in the count, and then, as you get to two strikes, just trying to be scrappy and just trying to be tough. I think we as a team at Amherst, we did a really good job of doing that, and just 1 through 9, the buy-in of guys just being tough at the plate. Different types of hitters too, which was great, because we had some guys that could drive the ball out of the yard. We had some guys that were not going to strike out no matter what. We're going to put the bat in the ball. We're going to go to opposite field. Some guys that were going to lay down bunts, a couple times a week, for a hit and a sacrifice situation, stuff like that. Just the buy into the team game, and figuring out, this is not about my swing. Um, this is not about my stats, certainly, but it's not about anything besides me doing my job right now, and helping my team score runs. Once we kind of bought into that, that philosophy, it really took off. Guys just were able to relax and be themselves, and ended up having a good couple of years there.
I think the big key that recruits need to hear is like, yes, you do need to do what you want to do to get into that school, but it's like once you get there, you're buying into helping the team win. And I think that sometimes gets lost in translation of like, yes, you can hit backside homers like no tomorrow, but if you're going to need to bunt in the 8th inning, like you're going to have to do it if it helps the team win. And I think especially now with, again, how developed some high school kids are more than some college kids, essentially with, again, where they grew up, right? The Texas, the California, the Floridas, they could play year round in high school. So it's a different atmosphere, but it's those kids are so advanced to like, all right, well, I already know what my job is. And it's like sometimes I feel like they can kind of butt heads with essentially college coaches because it's like you were so far ahead and now it's like you kind of have to tone that back to be like, all right, we're here. Like this is where the team is and it's a team effort. And I think I see more kids nowadays that end up having successful careers once they get there because it's like, all right, I was a pretty good high school athlete, but now I can just buy into what the coach is saying and get playing time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's spot on. The Bunting example is a really good example because usually the best hitters in high school don't ever get asked to bunt, right? But guess what? You get to a college team, and everyone in the lineup was the best hitter in high school, right? So, and somebody's got to be able to, hit 7, 8, 9, and put a bunt down when we have to. And I've seen really, really good teams where the three hitter is bunting in the third inning, and that's just the style of play that certain teams have. And shoot, for some programs, it really works. It really, really does. So I think ultimately kind of goes back to buying into the team mentality and also knowing that when you do get to college, this level is a little bit different. Maybe the same exact things that worked for you in high school, you're going to take some adjustments to work here. You don't want to go completely away from them, but you also that you gotta trust your coaches and you gotta trust the team to try to put runs on the board.
Moving on to the next question. Is there a certain type of hitting style that you like to teach your hitters?
I think honestly, the biggest thing is to not try to do too much. Effort at the plate doesn't do you a whole lot of good. That's something that Coach Bradley always preaches to our hitters. If you're if you're trying at 100%, you're probably going 30% over what you should be. And probably leading to overswinging and you spinning off a lot of pitches that you're not going to be able to hit. And there's also we kind of just talked about it, but there's so much information out there. There's so much development going on at an earlier age, and there's also a lot of information online and whatnot. It's pretty easy to get lost in all that stuff. So we're trying to keep it simple here. Guys have a tendency to outsmart themselves and outsmart the game. And again, it's a simple game. It's a hard thing, but you got to do the simple things really good. If we have hitters that are outsmarting themselves, that's where we see them kind of overthink. And obviously at a place like Princeton, we got a lot of thinkers. So we got to try to minimize the thought process in the box, simplify, and go baseline approach. Simple is better. Usually getting a cue that we like to use early and slow with your load, making sure you're on time with your load, seeing the ball deep and keeping your direction towards the middle of the field. But ultimately, it comes back to sticking to your identity. Again, a perfect example, you and I we were two very different players. You could hit the ball a mile, I could not. So I knew I had to put as many balls in play as possible and use as a left-handed hitter. I needed to use the opposite field. I needed to go to left field. If I struck out, I knew it was a bad at bat because my value was putting the ball in play. I knew I had to do that. I knew I had to force some pressure on the defense. You force pressure by walking up to the plate, and pitchers knew that they couldn't throw you a mistake because you're going to hit a home run. So again, that's sticking to the identity, right? That's knowing yourself and saying, I'm good at this. I'm going to make sure I continue to be good at this and just keep my strengths my strengths.
But I think going off of that, it's like, all right, we're two different hitters. And it's like something you could have been really good at was putting a bunt down, drag bunt, whether it's first base, third base, whatever, push bunt, whatever it may be. But I think later into my career, I realized, all right, after my first at bat, guys are playing me on the back of the infield. So it's, yeah, all right, you might have another chance to drive a ball in the gap, but it's also at the same point, they're giving me a free base hit if I bunt the ball down the third base line. And that 1-for-1 goes for 2-for-2. And if you're a freshman or a sophomore looking for playing time, like you're kind of adapting to the game. And it's a lot of like, yes, at the time when I was a freshman and sophomore, more stubborn than probably most of them. But it took me a lot longer to realize that part of the game of like, yes, that's helping the team win. Base runners help the team win. Yes, in your mind and your stubborn 18, 19-year-old mind, it's again, you don't think that, but then it's like, all right, well, when you lose as a team, you're just as mad as everyone else. So buying in and like taking a step back and looking at the game of like, all right, what else can I do to help the team? And I think the more you realize that and the faster, it makes it easier to win games. And essentially for teams that I think of that were good when we were growing up and are still good today, it's they buy into what the team wants. And I think that gray area of a lot of schools is what hurts more schools than not, because those standards are still the same at those schools from when we played. And again, Coach Bradley could be an example because he's been there for 27 years. But I mean, I'm sure he's adapted to different things, like we said in the beginning. But I would say his message probably from when he started to now is probably pretty much the same. And that's why people still go to Princeton and buy into what he has to say.
That's right. I also think that's why he's had a handful of big leaguers, which is pretty cool. So it's that type of thing that guys, guys kind of take ownership of their development and take ownership of who they are, and want to stick to that. And Coach Bradley lets them do that here.
All right, moving on into development. Are you guys at Princeton open to recruits about the development that needs to be put in before arriving to campus?
Yeah, for sure. I think ultimately we're recruiting them for a reason though. So we already see that they're pretty, pretty much, I wouldn't say a finished product, but they're not far off from where we need them to be. So I think the biggest thing for us after we are, commit a recruit is for them to get reps, to play games and just have fun, especially like the pressure once the pressure of the recruiting process is off a little bit, which is usually a big weight lifted off a lot of like kids' shoulders. We want them to enjoy the rest of their high school career and whatnot. Also play other sports, be athletic, be competitive. I played other sports in high school. I played 4 sports, and I think some of my best sports memories are still on the high school basketball court versus obviously a ton of baseball stuff, but go be athletic, go be competitive, do other stuff. It's not all just locking yourself in the batting cages and hitting until your hands bleed every day. That's not it. It's having fun and being a kid.
I'll make this part short, but I think that everything is what you just said there of playing other sports, right? And again, if you grow up in California, Texas, and Florida, and you do baseball year round, you do baseball year round. But I think today's world of kids is like they're like, oh, don't go play football, don't go play basketball. I want to just play baseball. Well, we live in the Northeast. You can't do that here. As much as we want to think you can. Sure, at the younger ages, you can play in indoor places and that, but like once you get older, that doesn't happen. And I think of a lot of where I got to be bigger, stronger, faster, essentially probably wasn't on the baseball field. Yes, in my later years of like when I got into college, it was, but I'm like playing football, playing basketball, just doing stupid stuff like with your friends and playing pickup basketball down the street from where you lived for 4 hours on a Saturday. Like that made you faster, stronger. And I feel like nowadays that's not, kids are like avoiding that. And I'm like, if you got hurt playing pickup basketball, you got hurt. But we laugh at it, but I'm like, kids don't do that anymore because they think they're going to get hurt. Well, dude, you could be lifting a weight in the gym at an organized high school team lift and get hurt. Like it's going to happen at some point. But I think some points we take the kid out of the kid, like let the kid be a kid.
Right. 100%. At the end of the day, we're talking about high school athletes and they, 15, 16, 17 years old. Go play, go be a kid, have fun.
Last question about development is, can you explain how crucial the development of Princeton is in your freshman and sophomore year?
Yeah, I think Coach Bradley says it all the time. He likes to evaluate where a player is at as a sophomore way more than a freshman. As a freshman, you come in and your job is to learn, to absorb, to be a good teammate, to get used to the level of play, see how things are moving probably a little bit faster. At a place like Princeton, you get used to the academic workload and you make sure you stay on top of that stuff. So it's kind of a lot to deal with. I mean, some guys can come in and hit the ground running and have a great freshman year, and that's great. But really, I think the key is as a freshman, you're learning. You're trying to take it all in. As a sophomore, you got a year under your belt. You have a little bit of a better feel of how things work. And we're hoping to see a step there. But also, the sophomore slump is a real thing. Just because that's the mindset. Oh, I'm supposed to be better as a sophomore than a freshman. Well, some of my beginner's luck ran out, and teams around the league know who I am now. So scouting reports, the tendencies, all that is a little bit more prevalent. They know how to get me out. Why am I getting so many curveballs? So it's tough. It really is. But I think a big thing for that that development is summer ball. We always send our guys after freshman year, really throughout. We leave it up to our guys to kind of drive the ship on where they want to go and what they want to do in the summer. Obviously, we have some guys, older guys in particular, but getting internships and jobs and stuff like that. But we usually push our younger guys to go play and go play in competitive leagues and get at bats. That's where a lot of development happens, especially when you don't have to deal with classes and the academic workload in the summer. A lot of the stress kind of goes away at the summer, and you can really just focus on baseball. So we want to get our guys out there playing high level summer baseball as much as they can.
I'll say it again, and I've said it on other podcasts. Summer baseball is the most fun you will have in college
It is.
because it's the most laid back, right? It's every day you're playing baseball. You might have Mondays off like you would in college or whatever. Essentially, that league has as their day. And again, leagues are different, right? But it's like, I think back to our time in the futures leagues of like, what did you have to worry about? You woke up. If you had to travel that day, you traveled. You played a game. You got back on a bus. You went home and you did it all again the next day. And you think about all the different kids of essentially of D1, D2, D3, like in the leagues we played in too, of like, yeah, you got the best of the best, but sometimes you didn't. And it's like, I use the example, I think it was on the second podcast of my last year in the futures, Vandy's entire recruiting class was in there. So they put all their incoming freshmen in the class. And it's like, you're facing guys that I look at now that got drafted in their junior year or senior year. And it's like, you're seeing that like 5 years later, essentially. But it's like, I played with them when they were 17, 18 years old. And it's like a lot of people, to change the subject, but like a lot of people are like, well, now kids are 22, 23, 24, 25 in college baseball. And I'm like, that's been normal. Like there's been instances where kids have had 7 years, right? Or now we're still almost at the end of the COVID years, but I'm like, that stuff was still normal. Yes. Was I a 23-year-old redshirt senior and felt old? Yeah. But it's now there's guys that are older and there's nothing you can do about it because there were kids that we played with that didn't go, they took a gap year or they took 2 years off and then went to college. So I think, yes, baseball has gotten older in that aspect, but it's like, it's going to be that way forever. There's going to be special cases everywhere. It's just not going to be as common as it is right.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. At summer ball, I think too, um, you get different guys from all over too. That's awesome. You get seniors, you get freshmen, you get like a bunch in between. And I always thought it was cool to be able to learn from different players in other organizations, other programs, and what they were doing. And also, as a D3 guy, I always wanted to play against Division 2, Division 1 guys, and be able to see how I stack up there too. So that's why it was always summer ball was always a great chance to do that.
I think a lot of gray area now, and again, it's a little bit different than recruiting, but it's not at the same time. Is a lot of kids get essentially poached nowadays in summer ball. So there are some coaches that don't put their kids in leagues because they know that they won't have them for that following year, which is, I mean, it is what it is, but essentially that's how it was before. It just wasn't as prominent of that's going to happen. So I think some guys try to hide guys, essentially, is the best quote I've heard somebody say.
Yeah, it's tough. It's unfortunate because again, we send our guys out because we're confident that they want to be a Princeton Tiger for 4 years. They want to graduate from here and be a part of this program. So we don't have to withhold guys. I think a lot of leagues like that, we're always able to send a couple of guys to the Cape each year. Any CBL, Futures, Coastal Plains, Northwoods. So but yeah, it is unfortunate for some programs where they literally have to hold some guys back because they don't want to lose them. But it is what it is.
Kid has a breakout year and you can't send him to the futures because he's going to be at D1 by the end of the futures. It's just like, I don't know. It's the horror stories, but I feel like that's always been around essentially. Because back in our day, you could move up from D3 to D2, 2-1, 3-1. And that was normal then.
Mhm.
It's still normal now. And people are like, no, I'm like, no, that's normal. Like Miles Sheehan was at Pierce the year before I got there. He transferred from Clark.
That's right.
I think he has either the first or second best ERA in Division II baseball ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a .27.
Yeah, we were missing him that year. That was my first year
Yeah,
I got to Clark. I actually moved into his room, in a suite in Blackstone Hall, and it was funny because I got lucky where one of my teammates was like, "Hey, my roommate just moved out. He's transferring. Do you wanna move into our suite?" And I was like, "100%." Ended up being Miles, and then I saw what type of career he ended up having, which is unreal.
crazy, but those were essentially not as limited now, essentially, of those stories that you hear, right? Of those kids moving up essentially from D3 to D2 or 2 to 1 or whatever it may be. All right, let's move a little bit on into the roster. Do you guys have a roster limit at Princeton currently?
For us, we get 7 recruits a year, so that, 7 times 4 is 28. That's essentially where our roster has always been. This year, we're at 31, which is the biggest roster that Coach Bradley's ever had, I'm pretty sure. Uh, so I think we don't necessarily have a limit. If we do, we don't get there. Put it that way. If we do, we don't get there. We're right around 30. We were at 29 last year, we're at 31 this year, so
So essentially you guys have 7 in class, right?
7 a class. Yep.
Right. And I think with that being said of how competitive one it already is in to get into an Ivy school, okay, adding school into it and now add a recruiting class. I think again, not just with Princeton, but I think the gray area of recruiting now is kids don't know what coaches are looking for, right? In that recruiting class with how flooded the portal is, with how flooded people's rosters are, because we're at the wits end kind of the COVID years. And I think kids get very lost in, all right, well, go look at their roster. Princeton might already have 4 shortstops. They're not going to bring in a fifth one. So I think kids lose value in, all right, well, first of all, now you only can bring in 7. And I'm not bringing in a shortstop this year. So those are kind of things you can look at essentially on your own. Now that you as a student athlete know that, hey, Princeton brings in 7 a year, right?
Yeah, 100%. Again, doing your homework on the school, it goes back to the fit, right? It goes back to the fit. You could be a really, really good player. You could even be a really good player with the academic profile that we're looking for, but if it's not the right fit, and that could completely be out of your control, we could already have committed a catcher and you're a stud catcher. It's just, uh, but yeah, when we're working with 7, that's where we gotta be sure about every single guy that we bring in. We're not one of those programs that can bring in, um, 10, 12 recruits a year. Trust me, I see a lot more than 7 players that I want to bring into the program because I think there are a lot of really good ball players out there. But that's why we doubly so have to do our homework on every guy. We really try to want to reduce the swings and misses on the recruits because 7's a small number. We want to make sure we're hitting on all of them.
Last question about rosters. Do you think that roster cuts at the D1 level next year will help or hurt the current high school recruiting classes?
It's might hurt a little bit because 'cause there'll be fewer spots, but each spot will mean a little bit more, so it'll help the guys that are really bought into to doing everything they can to play college baseball, I think. But it's also one of those things that depends on how you look at it, but I think overall the roster cuts are probably gonna level the playing field a little bit. I think the August 1st rules really helps, talking to not being able to talk to a recruit until, August 1st of their junior year really helps because that'll kind of refrain a lot of early commitments where the player's not developed yet. You just see something you like. You're hoping whatever you're hoping to get them tied up, and then you end up decommitting the player a couple years later. It's no good for anybody. So I really do like the fact that they put in that rule that you can't talk to recruits until August 1st of their junior year. But in general, I think it'll be interesting to see how things play out, especially with the junior college potential eligibility change there. I'm not completely sure how that's going to end up, but that could change things, in the landscape as well with eligibility. It seems like in college baseball, we keep playing with the eligibility rules, so we'll see what ends up staying. What sticks and what ultimately is going to be the new norm. But I do think ultimately the roster cuts probably best for everyone. It might hurt the current high school class, but it'll end up regulating itself, for the best.
I just think of the roster cuts of like I think about when I was at UMass Lowell. I don't remember how many we had, but it's like there are 3 guys essentially that could help a team at some point, right? Somebody goes down, whether you pick up a walk on that year that's at the school. Like there's different ways to look at that avenue of how those kids could help the team. But I think the only way to do the roster cuts was to help the guys that were still in school from COVID. I think that was the only way to kind of limit these rosters of like, oh, you've been hanging on to this kid for 3 years. Well, now you have to send him somewhere else because we need to get this down from where it is. And I think the enrollment part is the part that schools will kind of get mad at of like, all right, well, our enrollment here is now you're taking 3 kids away from our program. I think that's the part that people are going to be upset about.
Yeah, yeah. There's it's a complicated issue too, and I think ultimately I think about it as from a playing standpoint. You play college baseball to play, right? You don't just want to be on the team. At least most guys want to be on the field and in the action. So guys number 35 to 40, maybe you're not getting as much playing time as you want. Maybe it's just a little bit more incentive to go to a place where you're going to actually be able to get on the field and make an impact.
All right, moving on into camps. Do you guys host showcase camps or team camps on campus throughout the year? If so, can you explain why those are important to the recruits to attend?
Yes, we do. We usually have a couple camps a year. I think it's really important for us to try. We're out all summer trying to recruit, getting on the road, seeing a ton of kids. For us to be able to bring really good players onto campus, in one spot and be able to evaluate there is awesome. But we also try to make sure that the camp is instruction based too. So it's not just evaluating, it's not just a showcase. We're trying to hopefully send you home with something that you learn that you can apply to your game and implement into your daily routine and whatnot. So I think we do a pretty good job of that. And so the other thing too is when you come to one of our camps, you are very clearly telling us you're really interested in Princeton, which is really important. We talk about 7 spots, 7 offers that we have. We're not going to offer somebody who's not interested in actually accepting and coming to Princeton. So when you show up to our camp, that's pretty much us. It's pretty much you telling us, hey, I'm serious about this place, and if it's a mutual fit, and you like me, it gives you a chance to get on campus, interact with all of us, and also see the place for yourself. It's a beautiful campus. It's an amazing. Yeah, but again, from the instruction piece to the evaluation piece, it is really important for us in our process. The ideal way it works is that we're busting it all summer trying to find really good players. We get a list of them that we really like. We have some decisions to make. We bring them all to camp, and then we're able to streamline that decision together. Ideally, how it works out doesn't always work out, but that's the idea. And then also we're able to invite other coaches, and we have really good relationships with a lot of other schools. So we'll invite other coaches to attend and hopefully help them out too a little bit in their recruiting process as they're trying to put a class together. Where I think in our August camp we had like 10 or 11 guys attend and end up committing to a school that was in attendance that day. So definitely something that we're trying to do. As the network of coaches is small, and we all talk, we all know each other, we're all trying to help each other out. So anytime we find a guy who could really play but maybe not won't be the best fit for us for whatever reason, we're trying to get them to a really good spot as well, try to help them out.
I think the cool part there is like college coaches will help other college coaches get recruits. And it's a lot of the time I say to kids all the time, I'm like, you never know who you're going to play well in front of. And you never know who's going to be at a showcase. You never know who's going to see you play. But somebody might be looking for a third baseman, and the guy that saw you might not need one. But somebody in his conference he might reach out to that he's already friends with or was the best man in his wedding or whatever it may be, right? But he saw this kid play, he's got his information, and all he has to do is send it to that coach. So I think the connection there it means everything, right? And it's just, again, going about the game the right way, putting yourself in the best opportunity to have success. And I think, like I say to a lot of kids nowadays, is when you go to college, you're buying the coaching staff, you're not buying the school. For you guys, it's a little bit different being an Ivy in a prestigious school, right? But for most kids, you're buying the coaching staff. If you can't play under the coaching staff, you're never going to play. So why are you going to that school? Again, yes, if you were at Princeton, and I don't even know how this would work at an Ivy school. If you quit the sport, do you get to stay at the school?
Yeah, you do, but Again, we have such a close knit group of guys that we don't get that too often. But yeah,
Right. But I'm like, some people do navigate the system of like, all right, well, I just want to go to that school. Okay, well, you're never going to play at that school. And we've seen it probably more than not. And it's just, why would you pick a school that you're never going to have the opportunity to play at? And I think my brother said it on the first podcast the best. Play D3 and play now, right? Like, if D3 is the best option, you can play right away, go play. D2 is the best option, go play. Like, nothing beats playing experience.
100%. Again, I said it earlier, getting on the field for me was the most important thing. I just wanted an opportunity to play. And believe it or not, there are some really, really, really good players, good programs across all levels. So if you're curious about it, go watch a junior college game, go watch an NAIA game, go watch a D3 game, go watch a conference weekend and see how intense those games are and how competitive they are. Cause it's not like you just get to, sign up for those places. They got to choose you as well, So I completely agree. But also, I would say too, as we talk about helping other coaches out, there's probably four coaches that you've already had on this podcast that I've sent a player to that I'm like, hey, check this guy out. He's not for us for whatever reason, but he might be a good fit at Hartford. He might be a good fit at Amherst. He might be a good fit at Dean with Endy, right? Like there's there's guys that I do get some information. I just try to pass it along, just try to help guys out.
It's just, I think it goes back to the way we were brought up in the game of like respecting each other, even though you were on the other sidelines. Like I said it when I did Endy's podcast, when I was at Pearson, he was at SNU, we hated each other on the field, but like we played summer ball with each other or whatever it may be. And after you got off the field, it was fine. And I think those connections of the game of baseball are the reason most of New England baseball is still growing, because most coaches have a connection with somewhere. There was either player to player, teammate to teammate, summer ball teammate to summer ball teammate, whatever it may be. But I think a lot of the kids that we played with growing up have that same mindset of like, all right, we're here to get people better. Because again, in baseball, everyone knows that there's not $1 million for every coach, right? So it's just as much a grind for coaching as it is for playing. And I think recruits don't really know that part of the game where it's like, all right, well, this guy's been an assistant for 7 years. Why doesn't he have a head coach job? Well, he's made $35,000 for the last 7 years. And it's like, essentially going back to being that freshman again.
That's right. Again, it could be a grind. It's a tough industry. You never know when the next step is. You never know, but it's all about fit too, right? Like there's head coaching jobs that opened up that why would I ever leave Princeton? Why would I ever leave Amherst for that type of job? Not a great fit for me or for where I'm at right now. So again, that's something that everyone. My career as a coach now is similar to your career as a coach, and now getting into advising, and also just like when we were playing, it's you never know what's next. You never know who you're gonna come across again. So keeping those connections is everything.
All right, KB, that's all I got for you. I want to thank you for joining the podcast today, and I wish you and the Tigers the best of luck throughout the season.
I appreciate it, man. It's been a lot of fun. I also appreciate what you're doing here. It's actually funny. I actually thought about doing this as I was going through my college career, something I wanted to do post college. After I was done playing, was getting into the recruiting side of things. Fortunately, I got into coaching and I've loved it, so I haven't really explored it. But this is really helpful for guys that need that extra voice in the recruiting process. Hopefully, you're able to get a lot of guys to the next level.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You got it, man.